He stood in the middle of his own lavish birthday party, raised his glass of wine, and laughed loudly. A girl like her, looking like that, is clearly not worthy of me. The roar of laughter from the crowd made my blood run cold, my hands trembling as I realized I had just been turned into a public joke. But he didn't stop there. He brushed off our 2.5-year relationship, right in front of family and friends, then casually slid the bill toward me, as if it were some final favor. What few people knew was that moment wasn't the beginning. It was the result of a long chain of lies, forcing me to tear everything wide open. And the story begins like this. There are afternoons when I still vividly remember that moment, sitting in a little coffee shop on the corner, my hands stained with ink from running online ad campaigns, my head spinning with endless streams of statistics. That's when Dylan walked in. His confident stride made it feel like the whole room revolved around him. He smiled, set a cup of coffee down on my table, and within just a few short conversations I felt a strange breeze sweep into my life that had been far too calm and a little dull. I worked long hours in front of a screen, meticulous and perfectionist, to the point I sometimes forgot to eat dinner. Dylan was nothing like that. He was vibrant, talkative, always telling stories about the big projects he was negotiating. From that very first meeting, I was drawn to the dazzling light he seemed to generate all on his own. 2.5 years together, I once believed I had found the man of my dreams. We traveled to crowded summer destinations, snapped hundreds of photos, and posted them on social media. Dylan loved the shots where he stood in the center, wearing a crisp white shirt, hands in his pockets, flashing that confident smile. I was usually off to the side, holding a small bag, smiling softly. Under each photo, Dylan never failed to write some polished caption. A successful man's life always needs a beautiful woman by his side. Back then, I didn't think much of it. I just felt proud to have such a confident boyfriend. But between the lavish trips and romantic dinners, there were small moments that stung. Like the time I wore a pale yellow dress and he smirked before saying, "That color makes you look strange." I forced a smile, telling myself he was only joking. Or the day I shared a campaign post that got great engagement, proudly showing him, and he raised an eyebrow. "Yeah, that kind of online work must be pretty easy, huh?" I often brushed it off, thinking maybe men are just clumsy at giving compliments. But those little jabs slowly piled up, turning into a heavy stone lodged deep in my heart. My friends often asked, "Arya, are you sure Dylan's serious about you? He loves showing off too much." I always replied, "He just wants to inspire people." Deep down, I truly believed Dylan was talented. When he bragged about meeting big clients or preparing to sign an important deal, I listened with admiration. Maybe because I was introverted, always buried in ad reports and long nights with my laptop, I saw Dylan shine even brighter. He was like the sun, and I just needed to feel its warmth. One time, while we were sitting together in the park, Dylan casually asked, "Do you ever think you're not a good match for me? I'm always surrounded by successful people, while you're stuck crunching numbers online." I went silent, unsure of how to respond. Deep inside, it stung, but I reassured myself, maybe he was just testing me, pushing me to do better. I wanted to prove that I was worthy of standing by his side. That's why, when Dylan announced he was throwing a big birthday party, I thought this would be the moment he finally made our relationship official, in front of his friends and family. In my mind, I pictured us walking into the hall, Dylan holding my hand and saying, "This is the woman I cherish most." Just imagining it made my heart race, like I was being handed a chance to change my life. I spent an entire week preparing for the party. After work, I wandered through fashion stores, trying on dozens of dresses. In the end, I chose a navy blue gown, long, fitted, perfect for my not-so-striking figure. I believed the color would make me look more mature and elegant. I even booked a hair appointment, sitting for hours while they styled my hair into soft curls. Nothing too extravagant, but just enough to radiate sophistication. The night before the party, I could hardly sleep from the excitement. Have you ever been in a situation like that? That feeling of putting all your faith into one moment, believing it would change how people see you. Maybe even change your future. I lived in that hope for days, longing for a new beginning. What I didn't know was that very moment would open the door to a nightmare. I walked into that evening with all the nervous excitement I'd built up over days of preparation. Golden lights flooded the restaurant hall, Tables draped in pristine white linens, vases of fresh flowers carefully arranged, and soft jazz playing from the speakers in the corner. It was the kind of luxurious space I rarely ever stepped into. A place that seemed designed to flaunt status and success. I took a deep breath, adjusted my dress, and walked in, my heart full of hope that this would be the turning point in our relationship. But the moment I appeared, Dylan turned to look at me with an expression so cold, it was nothing like his usual gentle smile. He smirked and said something I never could have imagined. "You came to my party dressed like that?" His voice carried just loud enough for the people around us to hear. A few guests snickered, and my face flushed hot. I gripped my little clutch tightly, forcing a smile, but my heart pounded in humiliation. Throughout the entire party, Dylan made no effort to hide his intent to push me to the sidelines. He went on and on about the multi-million-dollar deals he was chasing, the power lunches he had with big names, and every so often he'd turn to me, using me as the example of ordinary. When I tried to join the conversation, mentioning a recent ad campaign I had managed, he immediately cut me off. Anyone can do that kind of online work. Here we're talking about real business. Some people looked at me with pity. Others seemed entertained by the humiliation unfolding right at the table. I sat there with a frozen, awkward smile plastered on my face, my ears ringing from Dylan's relentless words. The more he bragged about his achievements, the more skillfully he painted me as some dull girl, unworthy of standing next to him. I couldn't help but wonder, had he ever truly been proud to post our pictures online? Or had I only ever been a prop to decorate the dazzling image he created for himself? The climax hit when one of his friends raised a glass and half-jokingly asked, "So when are you going to officially introduce Arya to all of us?" I looked up at Dylan, my heart tightening, bracing for the answer I'd been longing to hear for so long. But instead, he let out a cold laugh, pointed at me and said, "She's not the kind of woman who suits me. Honestly, just look, anyone can see we're not a match." The room fell silent for a few seconds before whispers began to ripple through the crowd. Each word, ugly, not a match, stabbed straight into my chest like a knife. I was stunned, everything around me blurring. And he didn't stop there. Dylan went on, his tone full of satisfaction. "I think it's time to be clear. We should end things. This is my birthday party, and what better occasion to publicly end a relationship that's going nowhere?" The whole room seemed to spin. My eyes burned, but I bit my lip until it bled, determined not to cry. As if to complete the spectacle of humiliation, Dylan picked up the bill the waiter had just placed on the table, and pretending to be generous, slid it toward me. "Consider it my final gift. Why don't you cover this? For you, it should be nothing." A ripple of chuckles from a few nearby guests burned across my skin like fire. I stared at the long string of numbers printed on that slip of paper, my heart sinking. Not only was I being abandoned, I was being turned into a public joke. I sat frozen, my trembling hands resting on my lap, my chest hollow. Every gaze was fixed on me, some filled with pity, others gleaming with amusement. In all my 25 years, I had never felt so small, so utterly humiliated. Not even the late nights of work stress, nor the insecurities about my appearance, compared to the sting of being shamed so openly at the birthday party of the man I once loved. I walked out of the restaurant in a daze, as if I had just fallen into an endless pit. The cool night air pressed against me, yet I felt suffocated, my eyes blurred with the tears I had fought to hold back all evening. My legs trembled as I dragged myself to the sidewalk and called Nina. She didn't ask many questions, just told me to stay put and rushed over. When her car pulled up and I opened the door, I broke down, sobbing like a child, no longer able to keep up any facade of strength. Nina stayed silent, wrapping her arms tightly around me, then drove me back to her small apartment. In the quiet of her living room, I sat blankly on the sofa, clutching the cup of tea she made for me. My eyes were swollen and my voice hoarse as I recounted everything that had happened at the party. When I finished, Nina's expression wasn't nearly as shocked as I expected. She let out a sigh and said, "Arya, I've suspected Dylan for a long time. He's not the successful businessman he claims to be. He's just a contract worker, scrambling with odd jobs, always making things up to save face." I looked up, shaking my head in disbelief. For 2.5 years, I had listened to Dylan's endless stories about big deals and trips to different cities to sign contracts. Could it all have been a lie? The answer came faster than I expected. Nina pulled out her phone and handed it to me, showing a message she'd just received. The sender was a woman named Kara, introducing herself as Dylan's secret girlfriend. In the message, Kara asked if Nina knew me and said Dylan had been dating her for months, all while keeping up a public relationship with me to maintain his image. I went numb, my heart already cracked, shattered completely. It wasn't just public humiliation, it was betrayal behind my back. I felt trapped inside a layered nightmare with no way out. Nina placed her hand gently on my shoulder and said softly, "Arya, you need to face the truth. You deserve to know everything." I started sifting through my memories, lining up everything Dylan had ever told me. Those luxury business trips he flaunted with photos of hotel lobbies and first-class tickets now revealed glaring inconsistencies. Once, he claimed he had to meet a client in another city, but in one of the pictures he posted, there was a familiar-looking women's bracelet I'd never seen before. Now I understood. It was Kara's. He had taken her along, turning his cheating getaways into business trips. The more I thought about it, the more I felt like a puppet being pulled by strings. Those lavish dinners and wine parties Dylan called image investments often ended with me pulling out my card to pay. He always had a clever excuse, complaining he was short on cash and promising to pay me back right after his next big deal went through. I believed him because I wanted to support the man I loved. But looking back now, I realize I'd been footing the bill for his meaningless indulgences all along. Nina helped me go through the transactions on my phone, and the numbers flashing on the screen made my heart tighten. What I once thought were just small, temporary loans had stretched on for months. Dylan hadn't only deceived my love, he had exploited my money too, turning my trust into fuel for his lies and selfishness. Sitting in that room, bathed in warm yellow light, I buried my face in my hands and sobbed. Every sweet memory now felt like a bitter joke. I replayed each moment he bragged in front of friends, each photo we posted online that racked up hundreds of likes, each promise of a future together. All of it nothing more than a stage Dylan had built, where I was cast as the naive supporting role. Have you ever believed you were holding on to a beautiful story, only to suddenly realize it was just a carefully crafted mask worn by someone else? That gut-wrenching moment when you discover the person you loved most is actually a liar, a betrayer, and a user. It doesn't just shatter your heart. It makes you question whether you've been foolish, too trusting all along. That night, I sat next to Nina, listening to the clock tick, my mind tangled with 100 questions, yet only one truth standing clear. Dylan was never the man I believed in all this time. After a night drowned in tears, I thought I was too drained to ever be shocked again. But the next morning, my phone rang, and the gentle voice of Dylan's mother made my heart stop. She innocently asked why I hadn't gone with Dylan the night before to share the happy news, saying the whole family had prepared dinner to celebrate his engagement. I froze, my hand trembling as I gripped the phone. So after everything, Dylan had staged yet another act, casting me as the desperate woman clinging to him while he played the role of the reluctant man. I sat there in disbelief, every word from her landing like ice water poured over me. How could he so brazenly deceive even his own family? When I told Nina, her face burned with anger. "Arya, you can't stay silent anymore. It's time for everyone to see who Dylan really is." The thought of facing Dylan's family made me tremble with fear. But in Nina's determined eyes, I saw a strength I'd lost in myself. At last, I nodded. That afternoon, I put on a simple dress. Nothing fancy. I just wanted to walk in with calmness. Nina drove me there, reminding me along the way, "I won't let you stand alone. The truth has to come out." I took a deep breath, bracing myself for the most important confrontation of my life. The grand house glowed with lights, the smell of food drifting across the yard. When we stepped inside, Dylan's entire family was gathered around the table, faces bright with anticipation. Dylan stood in the center, wine glass in hand, a flicker of unease crossing his face when he saw me. He forced a smile before quickly slipping back into that fake confidence. "Oh, Arya, you finally made it. I didn't waste time." My voice trembled, but stayed firm. "I'm here to tell the truth. Dylan humiliated me and broke up with me in front of dozens of people at his own birthday party. There is no engagement." Silence swallowed the room as every eye turned to Dylan. He let out an awkward laugh and tried to deflect. "Arya's just being overly emotional. She's always been too clingy with me." Nina stood up immediately, holding her phone high as she read aloud the message from Kara, the woman who claimed to be Dylan's secret girlfriend. The words were so clear, so undeniable, that the entire table erupted in whispers. Dylan's mother's face drained of color, while his father clenched his hand on the table so tightly the veins bulged across his knuckles. As Dylan fumbled to defend himself, the dining room door swung open. A man walked in, an old colleague of Dylan's. I recognized him instantly. Nina had quietly reached out to him beforehand. Standing tall, his voice rang steady. "I apologize for interrupting, but I believe the family deserves the truth. Dylan was never a star at the company. He's currently under warning for fraud and is at risk of losing his job." Gasps filled the room as every eye turned toward Dylan. His face went pale, and in a rush of panic he snapped, "They're all lying." I didn't even have a chance to say another word before a sharp, icy female voice cut through the room. "And what about me, Dylan? Are you gonna tell your family I'm making things up too?" Every head turned. Kara, the woman from the messages, stepped inside, her eyes blazing with fury as she walked to the center of the room. She pulled a ring from her purse and tossed it onto the table. "You promised to marry me. You said you only kept that other relationship because you didn't want your friends to talk. Do you dare deny it?" The room exploded like a bomb. Dylan's mother gasped, his father slammed his hand against the table, and everyone else sat frozen in shock. Dylan stammered, his face turning red, then erupted in anger. "You're all ganging up on me." But his shouting only fueled the chaos. The evidence, the accusations, came crashing down like waves, leaving him with nowhere to run. I stood still, my fists clenched, my heart torn yet strangely relieved. This was the moment I had been waiting for. The truth, finally stripped bare for everyone to see, with no mask left to hide behind. That night, the room froze after Kara hurled the ring onto the table. No one believed Dylan's excuses anymore. His face flushed crimson, sweat dripping as his eyes darted around, desperate for a way out. But this time there was no one left on his side. His parents bowed their heads, a mix of anger and shame etched across their faces. His friends stayed silent, avoiding eye contact. Kara sat in tears, her anger dissolving into heartbreak. And me, the woman he once humiliated in front of a crowd, stood tall, steady, facing them all. I didn't need to shout nor strike back with cruel words. The truth alone was enough to strip Dylan of every ounce of dignity. All those flashy tales of being a successful businessman, all those so-called lavish business trips, they were nothing more than an empty facade. And now, with the mask ripped away, he had nothing left but his own shamelessness. In the days that followed, I heard that Dylan's family had cut him off completely. His father openly declared he could never forgive a liar like that. His friends distanced themselves. No one wanted their name tied to someone who deceived for love and money. At work, his fraudulent records surfaced, and Dylan was officially fired. From a man who once boasted about having it all, he suddenly had nothing. As for me, the surprising thing was, I didn't feel triumphant. Instead, I felt a light, soothing sense of peace. Looking back, I realized I had once been belittled, treated like a mere accessory in Dylan's fake success story. But in the end, I was the one who walked away with the truth. With courage. I was no longer the girl humiliated at a birthday party. I was the woman who stood up and defended her own worth. Nina often told me, "Arya, sometimes life forces us through pain just so we can learn how to love ourselves." Now I truly understood. I learned not to let anyone define my value by my looks or my title. I learned to look in the mirror and smile, because I know I deserve a love that is kind, genuine, and real. If you're listening to this story, I want to leave you with one thing. Never let anyone diminish you in love. The person who truly deserves you will never make you feel small or ugly. And remember this, lies, no matter how cleverly woven, will always come to light. The one who dares to face the truth is the one who truly wins in the end. As I close this painful chapter of my life, I don't see it as a failure. I see it as a powerful lesson that made me stronger and wiser. I know I still have a journey ahead, but this time, I'll walk it with faith in myself and in the true worth of a genuine heart. Thank you for listening to my story. See you next time.